Fedor Emelianenko was mocked for never fighting in the UFC until he destroyed a former UFC champ in just 36 seconds, and even Dana White had to admit he was wrong. For years, UFC President Dana White was openly dismissive of Fedor Emelianenko, often criticizing his resume and the level of competition he faced in Pride and other promotions. Despite Fedor's dominance and long winning streak, White repeatedly downplayed the Russian heavyweight's legacy because he never competed in the UFC and was seen as avoiding top-tier opponents. However, that narrative shifted dramatically on July 19, 2008, at Affliction, banned when Fedor faced Tim Sylvia, a former UFC heavyweight champion with notable wins and multiple title defenses. Sylvia had recently exited the UFC and was still considered a legitimate top-tier heavyweight. The fight didn't last long. Within moments of the opening bell, Fedor closed the distance, dropped Sylvia with a flurry of punches, and secured a rear-naked choke, forcing the tap just 36 seconds into the first round. It was a shocking and decisive finish that showcased Fedor's speed, power, and technique against a proven UFC veteran. Dana White, who was running a UFC fight night on the same evening, was asked about the result during the broadcast. In a rare moment of praise for Fedor, White told reporter Kevin Ioli, "It does change my opinion. Tim Sylvia was a real opponent." This marked one of the few times Dana White publicly acknowledged Fedor's legitimacy and skill. Although he still didn't manage to sign him to the UFC, Fedor's performance that night silenced many critics and earned the respect of even his harshest detractors. If you're enjoying these untold MMA stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button. MMA Thread drops 2 to 3 updates daily to keep you ahead of the fight game. Fedor Emelianenko is often named among the greatest fighters in MMA history, particularly in the heavyweight division. From the early 2000s to the mid-2010s, he built a legendary resume with a 10-year unbeaten streak, defeating elite fighters such as Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Mirko Cro Cop, Mark Coleman, and Andrei Arlovski. His calm demeanor, unmatched composure, and devastating finishing ability made him an icon of the sport. Yet, despite his massive reputation and fan demand, Fedor never competed in the UFC, a glaring omission in an otherwise historic career. Several factors contributed to this. Failed contract negotiations. UFC and Fedor's management, particularly his handlers at M1 Global, couldn't come to terms. M1 demanded co-promotion rights with the UFC, which Dana White was firmly against. Creative control and financial terms. Fedor's team also sought more freedom and favorable conditions than the UFC was willing to offer at the time. Timing and missed windows. Fedor was at his peak during Pride's run in the early to mid-2000s. By the time Pride dissolved and many of its stars came to the UFC, Fedor chose to fight elsewhere, in promotions like Affliction, Strikeforce, and later Bellator. Despite never stepping inside the octagon, Fedor still faced and beat several former UFC champions outside the promotion, like Tim Sylvia, Andrei Arlovski, and Frank Mir, proving he belonged among the best. Many fans and analysts still consider him the GOAT heavyweight, regardless of never signing with the UFC, a testament to how dominant and respected he was across the MMA landscape. Affliction, originally a popular MMA-themed clothing brand, made a bold move in 2008 by launching its own fight promotion, Affliction Entertainment, aiming to rival the UFC. They assembled a roster of big-name fighters, many of whom were former UFC stars, and made Fedor Emelianenko the centerpiece of their promotional efforts. Their first event, Affliction, banned, took place on July 19, 2008, and was a high-budget spectacle headlined by Fedor versus Tim Sylvia. Despite going head-to-head with a UFC event the same night, Affliction drew significant attention, thanks in part to Fedor's brutal 36-second submission win over Sylvia. The event also featured top-tier talent like Andrei Arlovski, Josh Barnett, and Vitor Belfort, signaling that Affliction was serious about competing with the UFC. The second event, Affliction, Day of Reckoning, was held in January 2009, again headlined by Fedor, this time against Arlovski, another former UFC heavyweight champion. Fedor delivered another highlight reel KO, reinforcing his superstar status outside the octagon. However, behind the scenes, the promotion was financially unsustainable. Affliction was spending massive amounts on fighter salaries and event production, but struggling to generate enough revenue through pay-per-view and ticket sales. The final blow came when a third event, Affliction Trilogy, scheduled for August 1st, 2009, had to be canceled after Josh Barnett, Fedor's scheduled opponent, failed a pre-fight drug test. With no time to find a credible replacement, the event was scrapped. Just days later, on July 24th, 2009, Affliction officially shut down its MMA operations and returned to being a sponsor for the UFC, ending its brief but memorable attempt to rival the sport's dominant organization. Don't miss out. Subscribe now to MMA Thread and stay updated with real stories behind the UFC headlines. See you in the next one.